Hello, hi. My name is Jessica Bird Beza. I'm the Executive Artistic Director at Playwrights Foundation. And thank you so much for joining us for this conversation around the plays To Saints and Stars and Derecho, which are in our 43rd Bay Area Playwrights Festival, which is going on right now, July 17th through July 26th. I'm very excited to have such a wonderful group of women with me here today to talk about science, religion, and politics and their personal experiences. The plays that we're in conversation with today, To Saints and Stars. To Saints and Stars is about Sophia, a NASA astronaut, and Zoe, a wife of a Greek Orthodox priest, and they have been friends since childhood. And that play explores the intersection of science and faith and the power of lifelong friendship. And Derecho by Noel Viñas focuses on the lead character, Eugenia Silvia, who fights for an endorsement from an old friend for her primary campaign in the Virginia General Assembly. And To Saints and Stars is written by Jordan Ramirez Puckett. I forgot to say that earlier. But I want to welcome our panelists who will get to introduce themselves and have a fabulous conversation here today. Here they come. And I'm going to pass it off to Davinia Shorter, who is our dramaturg for To Saints and Stars, and have her introduce herself and kick us off today.
Thank you, Jessica. Hi, everyone. My name is Davinia Shorter. I am, as she said, the dramaturg for To Saints and Stars and today's moderator for the panel. And my work has been pretty simple. I've just been helping Jordan make this play the best that it can be. And I'm very excited to have a conversation with our lovely panelists today. And I'm going to pass it to Melissa.
Hi, everybody. My name's Melissa Lane. I'm a geologist, but instead of doing a lot of Earth geology, my career has been focused on planetary geology and interpreting NASA spacecraft data of Mars and trying to understand the geology on that planet. But I'm also interested in the science of the moon and also the Martian moons and asteroids as well, because we're going to be eventually sending humans to those bodies. So I'm interested in studying that as well. I wanted to be an astronaut for most of my life. And although I didn't get beyond the interview stage of that, I hope to get to space one day. That's been a lifelong dream of mine too. So I'm interested in this play for the space flight aspects of it.
Thank you, Melissa. Teva, how about you?
Hello, everyone. My name is Teva Regal. I am currently an adjunct professor of theology at Boston College, and I also work at MIT in the sciences as well. I grew up in the Orthodox Church in the Romanian tradition, and that was kind of the milieu in which my life revolved. So I can identify very much with the character of Zoe in the play. And in my adult life, I've worked for the restoration of the female diaconate, which is one of the ministry of which she feels called. So I'm very happy to be part of this conversation, and I look forward to it.
Thanks, Teva. Phyllis, you're good, go next.
Fantastic. So my name is Phyllis Whittlesey. I'm a PhD space scientist at UC Berkeley's Space Sciences Lab. Professionally, in my day career for money and for joy, I built space science instrumentation to study space weather and planetary bodies, and particular look at plasmas and charged particles out in space with the idea of enabling human spaceflight. For this particular play, I served as a spaceflight expert for To Saints and Stars for Jordan, and really enjoyed being a part of that whole process, and also have a passion for science communication and outreach. So I'm really excited to be a part of this conversation today.
Thank you, Phyllis. It's been so great to have you on this project. And we also have Delegate Elizabeth Guzman, who's been with us and has also been involved with Derecho by Noel Viñas.
Thank you. Yes, I'm Delegate Elizabeth Guzman. I represent the 31st District in the House of Delegates in Virginia. I was elected in 2017 as the first Hispanic female immigrant ever elected in the Virginia Assembly, which is the oldest legislative body in this country. If you can tell by my accent, I'm originally from Peru. I came to this country as a single mom many years ago, looking for opportunities for my oldest daughter, Pamela, who's gonna turn 29 this year. And you know, at the beginning, like many immigrants, I juggled multiple jobs to make ends meet. But through hard work and dedication, I was able to achieve higher education myself. And now I have 2 master's degrees, one in social work and another one in public administration. And currently in the Virginia Assembly this past year, Democrats retake the majority in the House and the Senate after 26 years. So I'm currently serving as the chair of the Committee on Social Services and the vice chair of education, and I'm also the vice chair of the Labor Committee. I'm also second union generation and the second union member ever elected in the Virginia Assembly, as I'm the vice president of my union, AFSCME Local 3001. As it was mentioned earlier, it was an honor to be part of the conversations of their issue. So I hope you enjoy it. When you see it, it's just really fun. So you can just take, a taste of what it's like to run for office as a brown person in Virginia. So I hope you enjoy it.
Thank you, Delegate Elizabeth. Yeah, it is so amazing to be in a room full of such talented and, across such a broad spectrum of fields with you all. So thank you for taking the time to be here. And I do want to talk a little bit about the ways that all of you kind of relate to the 2 plays that we've mentioned so far. But first, I want to get into a little bit of sort of the fields that you all are involved in. You're in such specific and special places of expertise. I really want to know what initially drew each of you to these specific fields. What got you into them and got you started? Melissa, would you care to start?
Sure. My first interest in the sciences was probably during my 9th grade earth sciences class. I just really was interested in hearing about how you could interpret the earth through the rocks. Each rock has a story. You can look at the composition and know whether it came from a volcano or whether it was laid down as a sediment in an ocean. And some places in the middle of a continent can be completely dry today, but it could be made up of much limestone. So you knew there was a deep ocean there at one time. And just the way that geology can be read as a story was always really fascinating to me. And I always thought, volcanic eruptions were kind of cool. And the story of ancient civilizations and how they interacted with their environments was always really interesting to me. And when I went to college, I went for pre-medicine, and I just it didn't really click for me. But my roommate at the time was a geology major, and she encouraged me to take yet another lab class, which I resisted a lot at first, but I eventually took an intro to geology course in college, and that really set the path for me to go that direction. I just loved it a whole lot more than chemistry and the biology and all of that and physics. But it's sort of funny because now that I have a PhD in geology, I've had to take all those classes anyway, and geology is really a perfect blend of all of those other physical sciences. So I'm kind of all of the above now, even though my degree is geology and planetary science, but I do remote sensing, which means that I'm looking at the way energy interacts with rocks and minerals. And so that's basically mineral physics. So that's how I sort of got into it. And as I was doing my education, I didn't really have an end game in mind. It's been evolving as I've gone through coursework and job opportunities and things like that too. So, but probably my very first inspiration for wanting to be interested in space was when I remember when I was probably in about 4th grade, there was a meteor shower and I thought, oh, that sounds kind of neat. And I dragged my older sister out to the backyard and we brought our sleeping bags out there and we were just watching falling stars. And there was this giant one that went across, or what seemed giant to me at the time. I just was mesmerized by it. And I said something to my sister who was sound asleep and missed it all. And I just thought, this is so miraculous. And I loved it. So, I mean, now in retrospect, I can go back and see how my interest in planetary science and space science developed over time. But I really didn't know it as I was taking each step. It just sort of gradually evolved to where my career is today.
Yeah, that's amazing, Melissa. And I want to go back because I know you've also been, interested in being an astronaut at one point. And I do want to get back to that, but I want to hear from someone else in the group. Maybe Teva?
I think that the story of my life trajectory in terms of my interest in theology and its ministerial applications has always been something I think more of an avocation, much longer before it became a vocation. I was always interested in kind of the big questions in life. Is there a God? What are we doing here? What is the relationship between faith and reason and science? I mean, speaking of science, that was always my math actually was always my discipline of choice. In fact, I work in computer science and I still do for many years. But I think growing up in the church, and the Orthodox Church in particular, which I can relate very much then to the character of Zoe, I was always very involved, as our family was. And I did a lot of youth work in my youth, which was always very much appreciated. But when I got to adulthood, there really wasn't a space so much for the ministry of women. And that spurred me to really start to, in fact, investigate that further. And one of the things we did, and myself and like-minded people, we put together a journal called the St. Nina Quarterly, which was to explore the ministry of women, and in doing so, cultivate a greater understanding of ministry in the lives of both women and men. And I was the only one who had my own theology degree. So that forced me, or not forced me, but certainly gave me a wonderful push to finally get to seminary, just like the character in our play, and in order to get my MDiv. And then years later, I continued to get my PhD, and now I actually teach in the field of theology. So I kind of think it's sort of has worked its way in amazing ways. I never thought that this is where I would be at this stage in my life, but I think that that's one of the things that continues to drive me are those initial questions, but also the idea that who we are is formed by the community that we keep. We aren't just automatons. And that community is important. And that community, for those of us who grew up in the church, is formed, that becomes the community. And their aspirations and how we see ourselves is either given a green light or perhaps circumscribed. So I see my work advocating for the restoration of the female diacon in the church is something not for me, but for those generations of women, young women now that will come after us, to hopefully allow them to serve to the best of that they think is the best of their ability, and also to meet what I think is a grave ministerial need in the church, as well as our mission to the world, so to speak. And I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Yeah, that's great, Teva. And I really love what you said about community too. I think that really struck a chord with me. I'll keep the order that we've been going in. Phyllis, how about you?
Sure. So as a space scientist, what inspired me originally to follow down this path, much like Melissa and I hope I'm not saying your name wrong, Teva? Okay. is, like as a child, and actually sort of like Sophia, it's just looking at the magnificence of the heavens. When you're so small already from everyone else around you when you're a child, and you look up and you see just like a really beautiful sky with all of these stars against this rich black background. It almost feels tactile and real. And I remember seeing this as a child and thinking that is so big and beautiful. And if you stare at it for long enough, you almost feel like you're falling upwards into the stars. And I remember that feeling stuck with me forever. And I just knew that I wanted to chase whatever it was about that heavenly sky and figure out more about this thing that made me feel so special and so magnificent whenever I stared up into it. So initially, I thought I wanted to be an astrophysicist or an astronomer as soon as I learned what that word was, just probably around the age of like 8 or 10. And then, I went and I pursued that a little bit more, and I realized that the way that people study the stars really far away is through, telescopes of various sizes, either on Earth or in space. And that led me to studying physics once I got to school and college. And once I got to college and I started studying school there, then I met a professor that studied this thing called space physics. I thought, well, that's close to like astrophysics. I want to do research with this person, and that person started showing me how to look at spacecraft data from actual satellites in space that were up there in that place that I thought was so fascinating, and learn more about what these spacecraft were seeing. And I thought that was just so cool. And I wanted to know more about where that information came from. That way I could understand how these observations in space were made. And I said, I'm going to go figure out how those people who build those spacecraft make that happen, because I want to make sure they're doing a really good job, because this means a lot to me. And so in graduate school, I set out to start building those things. And I worked on a mission there called NASA's Parker Solar Probe, which holds the current record for the fastest man-made vehicle ever, and is the closest thing ever to the sun, which is incredible. I can't believe that's the first project I ever worked on. I and a really talented team of engineers and scientists put 2 sensors together that are on that spacecraft currently, measuring charged particles in the sun's atmosphere. And I've ever since I stepped into a lab and started putting things together, things that actually go out into space and like touch and see and smell those things that are out there, I've just been thrilled ever since then. So I have a sensor that is pickup sensor, sort of like an understudy in theater terms, for an instrument that might be mounted on NASA's Lunar Gateway, which is very exciting. The Lunar Gateway is like a small version of the ISS that we hope will get launched and will orbit around the moon. And I also have a sensor on 2 spacecraft that have yet to be built that might be going to Mars. So serving as the subject matter expert on spaceflight to Saints and Stars for Jordan's play was really fun in that aspect, because they're talking about all the different aspects of the craft and like the separation bolts and nuts, and I'm very much deeply embedded into that world. So it was really fun to figure out a way to help Jordan use that language and that frame of that world as a backdrop for her play.
Yeah, it's been really fun to have you, Phyllis, but also more than anything, it's been super informative and incredibly helpful. So we are grateful for your expertise there.
It's been fun. Thanks.
Thank you. Delegate Elizabeth, please let us know what drew you to politics and to the place you're in now.
Well, I would start by saying that I never was a politician. I think the only experience I had was I was the president of my high school class, if that counts as such. And I remember that campaign, but that's the best experience I had. In Virginia, there are 2 largest counties. One is Fairfax County, and the second largest is Prince William County. And that's where I live now. I moved here with the dream of buying my own property. It was not as expensive. It's really close to Washington, D.C., 35 minutes away. And Fairfax, it was even more expensive. So I said, okay, I cannot afford to live in Fairfax, but I'm gonna move to Prince William County. When I got here, the diversity was not there. My daughter was a 1 out of the 3 Latinas in her middle school. So a little I knew where I was moving into. Prince William County was the first county in the country who signed an agreement with ICE and law enforcement. So anyone, when you get stopped, in a traffic light or anything like that, a police officer could inquire your immigration status. So my daughter back then in middle school came one day crying, and she was afraid. And I was a single mom then, and she said, "Are they gonna take you too?" And I said, "What's going on?" And she said, "Well, my classmates' parents are being deported, and now they're gonna be into foster care, my classmates." And I said, "Is that gonna happen to me too?" So I had to experience to her at that age, the difference in between being documented and undocumented immigrant. And she understood, and she was happy that we had legal presence here. However, I could tell you as her mom that her life changed in school. She would, anything that will not go well, she will say, "It's because I was not born here. It's because of my last name." So that hurt me, and it took many years to support, and counsel, and to make sure that she felt confident again. Years later, I got married. I was involved, and I have 4 children now. My husband is from Peru as well. And I became a volunteer as a door knocker during the Obama campaign in 2008. And, since then, I use the language that I speak now and fluently to get engaged the community during the election process. I realized that we had local elected officials that didn't represent the interests of all of their constituency, and Latinos, the same way that I moved here, they more and more were moving here as well, with the same dream of buying their first home. So, and we didn't have an advocate, and then I got involved in 2016 in the Senator Sanders campaign, and his bid for the presidency. He really got me fired up. I mean, all of the things that he was talking about his experience as the child of an immigrant, living in a 2-bedroom apartment, his parents having multiple jobs, the lack of early childhood education programs, and sometimes there is a disadvantage, right? Some children who can afford early childhood and those who don't. So everything that he was talking about will go straight to my heart. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this just guy knows the struggles, for people who look like me. So after he concluded his campaign, he held a town hall, a virtual town hall, and asked all of the individuals who participated during his campaign to convert what he called a revolution into a revolution to run for office, into a revolution of running, for school board, local board, in running for a state legislature. So I started doing my research because, to be honest with you, I didn't even know what a delegate did back then. So the first thing I did is, let me see who my delegates. So, and then I started researching his name. I couldn't even pronounce his last name. His name is Scott Lingenfelter. And I'm like, oh my gosh, but my district is diverse. How could he be? And all of the remarks that he was talking about, they were also downgrading or demonizing the Latino community and undocumented immigrants. So I think that's what it made me think about the idea of exploring to run for office. Little I knew that I would be the first Latina ever running for an elected official as an elected official at the state level. And Latinos represent, according to the census of 2010, 10% of the population across the state, but the state is huge. But in Northern Virginia, it's definitely higher. In my district, it's 14%. So, I was exploring the idea, then Trump won. And my son came from school one day and he came, he's like, "Mommy, Trump won, right?" And I said, "Yeah, it was public news. Everybody knew about it." And he was like, "Well, we need to leave this country." And I'm like, "What do you mean?" And he's like, "Yeah, because he said multiple times that he doesn't want people who speak Spanish in this country. So we have to go. We have to go back either to your country, or we could go to Canada, where my husband's family now is established." And I said, no, we can stay here. And it's okay, he can just not tell people to leave this country. We have rights, we are citizens. So then I think that's when that decided. I said I had to stay on this race for my children. It's important for them and for the many children who are out there who look like them, who they could look at someone who looked like me, who looked like them and said, I can be an official one day. And for my children, just not to feel less of an American because they were brown or their last name was Guzman. So with that, I'm very feisty when it had to do with my children. And for me at that point of time, he was messing with my children and I had to do everything that I could possibly do, to get people involved and get elected. So run for office, at the beginning, I thought everybody would be excited, but it wasn't the experience, as you will see in Derecho. It's just about, for many years, we're looking at people of color as targets, as token, and this is public news, right? So we can be there for the picture, but we can be there for the votes, but not a place where you could actually lead the ticket or to run for office. So we were questioned, as whether you have multiple jobs, how you're gonna juggle multiple responsibilities because the legislature is only a part-time job. Who's gonna watch your children? Does your employer allow you to run for office? So I had an answer for every single question, but my first answer was, I'm sure all of those male legislators who are serving in the Virginia Assembly do have a job because they cannot live off a salary of $17,000 a year in the Northern Virginia area. And if they could do it, well, I could do it as well. So with that, I just started knocking on doors, fundraising money, and I unseated the incumbent who was in office for 16 years. And I defeated him by 9 points. And I flipped the seat red to blue after 26 years. That's what happened.
Thank you for sharing that with us, and thank you for fighting for your children and fighting for the delegates in your district as well.
Thank you.
It's really great to hear. I will, part of what's great about these conversations is you kind of start with a plan in mind, but then hearing from you all and hearing what you all have to say, I just feel very inspired and pick up on different things that everyone has said. And so far, all four of you have referenced, if not one character, maybe two of the characters in both of the plays that we've been talking about. And so I really want to ask kind of if each of you, if you do feel connected to a character in either To Saints and Stars or Noelle's Derecho, what has that connection been like, being able to kind of see or experience these plays, and how do you feel connected through the work that you're doing or the life that you've experienced? And whoever wants to start this one, please feel free, and then go from there as you feel comfortable.
I'll start again. I have a short answer. I actually can relate to both of the characters in To Saints and Stars, because not only do I have aspirations to get to space one day, I also am a parent to a child. So I've been throughout my career trying to merge parenthood with a career. And I've noticed that a lot of the women that do excel in my career of planetary scientists, those women who end up being the principal investigator or the head of a mission or a deputy principal investigator or a top line professor, a lot of those women don't have children. So I've been talking to a friend of mine who has a new job at NASA headquarters about trying to find more opportunities for women who are planetary scientists, because if you take a break or if you back up your hours a little bit and you try to have children, it tends to derail your career somewhat. And so there are a lot of opportunities for early scientists, early career people. There are certain buckets of money for proposals for those people, for grants and funding, and for other populations, they have programs specific to those people. And I said, I really think you're kind of missing the bucket of parents who have had to maybe give caregivers to older parents or caregivers to their children. You know, if you're not the primary breadwinner of the family, you know, you have to make that decision. Do you have the kids, or do you go with your career? So I'm hoping that as both a planetary scientist and a parent, that I can try to carve the way for future women, predominantly women, who want to do both and to keep having funding. You know, they always say in academic world, publish or perish. Well, if you're not full-time in your field and you're doing other things on the side, of course your publications dwindle, or you know, the collaborations you have dwindle. And I really don't want it to be that way for myself, but also for any other woman who's coming from behind me, who's younger than I am. So I related to both characters pretty well in the show that I saw.
I guess I'll follow, since that's our normal routine here. I also related to both.
I don't want to go first every time now. You're up next.
Maybe next time. I also related to both characters, both Zoe and Sophia, but for a little bit different reasons. I think in my introduction, I mentioned that my day job has always been in computer science. So I am always been very kind of logical and understanding of kind of the facts, that thing, but also relating to Zoe in terms of being someone kind of raised in the faith, but wanting to serve and wanting to serve more. And if I can say, I think that the playwright in this case was totally dead on in her experience. It was definitely, it made it so very, very real. I think for women in the church, it can be difficult. And from my childhood, certainly there have been many more doors open in terms of theological education as Zoe has done. She got her MDiv. And in church governance is another kind of area, and even in some ministerial fields, something like chaplaincy or ways to kind of minister. But when it comes to kind of institutional authority, there's still that very much that barrier in terms of her desire to kind of establish the female diaconate within the church and to be wanting to participate in that. And the reaction of her husband, the priest, was just so right on. Why do you want to do this? Why can't you just do the ministry without having the title? That sort of thing. You know, it was the same excuses in some way, if I can say it so boldly that way, that we hear in other fields, although perhaps not so boldly in other fields as we still hear in the church. So I think that is something that very much resonated with not only my own experience, but from the experience of other women I know who have gone to seminary and then are not able to fully perhaps live out unless they marry a priest, which in some cases they do work as a team and a couple and really do that as a joint ministry. But in other cases, not. So I think that that's something that rang very true in the play. And I was very moved by that, and that's its representation as well. I'll leave it at that.
All right, so I will go next. I think that in my case, there are a few things, you know, that Eugenia, who is the candidate who was running for office, I thought always that, you know, accent was a barrier in order to run for office, but that was not the case because she came here as a child. She was a dreamer, what we called a dreamer coming to this. So I think that as all dreamers, you know, they have challenges as which culture do they belong? You know, do I still belong to the culture of my parents? Or I'm an American, I'm just one American and I'm gonna act as an American. So on your journey to run for office, you constantly have to juggle those two worlds, because you're are trying to engage a community that usually do not participate in elections, that you have to educate, that you have to explore, and then how are you gonna communicate with them? And what values are you gonna embrace while you are speaking with that community? You know, when you are at the doors, you don't know whether you are dealing with the first generation, with immigrants, first generation immigrants, second generation immigrants, and how do you prepare to these multiple interactions? Because as you are, you know, when you are even speaking publicly and you look at your audience and you are like, okay, so which language I'm going to speak first? So it's, I think those struggles were, you know, were similar, as to find, not to find your identity because you really know where you came from and where do you belong, but then where do you exactly fit? I always, you know, I grew up as an American. I never felt different. My English is perfect, but I do know that I come from a different culture, that where their values are different, where they dance differently, where they eat differently, where they vote differently. So it's like, okay, so what I'm gonna do, because you have to interact with both worlds and you have to find a way to outreach and engage both communities. And that is just one culture, you know. On top of that, you're gonna have African-American constituency, you're gonna have white community. So which is gonna be my role anytime in different places? So I think those are the struggles that I could relate to as a candidate, you know, talking in English or Spanish, and how I'm gonna make sure that I fit well or I present well to different communities that do not look like me. I think in my case, it was probably more difficult because Eugenia, she was here since 4 years old, but then she had a struggle of going back to her roots and trying to play like being more Latina, not as American. So I think that's how I relate with this play.
All right, I guess that leaves me then. So this is going to be kind of obvious, but I obviously related quite a bit to Sophia, but I also related a bit to Ken, who's like her partner in that play, To Saints and Stars, and I relate to each of them in different ways. So Sophia spends a lot of her time early on in the play, you know, like sort of double checking all of these different things and very much going through like the procedures for that are associated with this really important mission that she's training for and trying out for, and you know, very much like going back and double checking and looking at it and saying, this is the way we should do it. I ran the numbers, I checked this, these are the facts that I have, but also not really sharing very much of herself with her colleagues, right? Because there's this sort of guarded aspect to letting too much out. And I really relate to that earlier in my career. I'm still technically an early career scientist, but much earlier in my career, before I started really understanding who these people are that I'm working with, I tended to be a little more reserved and going back and double checking over again and using that almost as a shield of authority, if you will. And what I thought was interesting is later in the play, in the script, you know, as they're like on cruise to Mars and they've already been selected, Sophia and Ken, you know, he's like, tell me about you, you know, like I don't, you know, like I know these things about the way that you work, but what's your background? And as I've begun to mature along in my career, I find that, you know, I've realized all of a sudden everyone feels a little bit like they don't quite belong. And if I can just be a little bit brave and step outside of that and ask someone, hey, tell me about you, you know, like I like you and I like working about you and I value you as a human. What I think is interesting, really interesting about human spaceflight is so much of the success of human spaceflight isn't necessary. I mean, it's of course on the machinery and the machines and the mission design and all of this huge pyramid of all of these people that have built this, you know, finely honed craft that's protecting people as they explore the frontiers, if you would, very, you know, noble, if you would. But so much of the success of that is actually the interactions between those astronauts. How well are they going to agree? Because they're really become this community for however long their mission duration is. And so I really feel like I have enjoyed stepping outside my personal comfort zone of behind the shield of authority and asking people like, hey, what's your motivation? Why are we working together? What is it that we have in common? And that sort of brings you together behind this united mission and this united goal for whatever the project is that I happen to be working on at any time. So even though those characters have quite a bit of conflict, I find that in different ways, I really do relate to both of them for different reasons.
Yeah, thank you everyone for your answers on that. Sort of in keeping in line with our conversation about, the characters in these plays, but also bringing it back a little bit to your work. Sophia and Zoe are two dynamic women in both in very different fields. Eugenia is going for such a big goal in this moment, where she's trying to be a delegate and trying to run for office. And in every way, they have stakes in this play and challenges that they're facing by being in these specific positions. And I want to know, I'd be interested in hearing from you all if there are any challenges that you've come up against in the spaces that you've been in the fields of your expertise. And Melissa, I do want to give you a pass on starting. So Teva, I'm actually going to pass it to you first.
Oh, that's such a complicated question. I
Please
think
feel free to sit with it if you need to.
right. From the computer science perspective, I mean, there are actually a lot of similarities. I remember in math club in high school, I was one of two girls in the math club, and all the other ones were guys. And when I graduated in computer science, in my first job, there were many men as well. Although at that time, there actually were quite a few women. It seems as though women have actually participated less in that field as years have gone on. And for many years, I taught in the graduate school at Boston University. And in my first years, I had probably an equal number. It was a graduate program in data communications. I probably had an equal number of women and men, but by the time I finished, my last class were all men, and I was the only woman in the class as their instructor. So it sort of had this weird feeling like not all progress is forward. Kind of changes come and go in terms of especially women in tech fields. So, but it's similar in some respects to the work I've done in the church. When I was young, there were many women working, and I worked a lot in youth work, and that was very much appreciated and encouraged and supported. When I kind of graduated from that and started to question things about the ministry of women, and my academic area of expertise is in liturgical theology and history, both areas of which are totally dominated. My questions became less welcome, let's say, in terms of what kind of questions I should be asking. So that actually forced me to become much more educated in fields. So now I can have something to, or be able to kind of back it up where I can't, so it's not as patronizing. The answers cannot be as patronizing because I know all the history and things that go behind it. But what I kind of grieve is that those same patronizing answers are used when women do question things, especially in the church. And in the play, what rang so true is when Zoe was wrestling with the idea of actually formally trying to petition to or for ordination to the diaconate, how her husband discouraged it with all the same excuses that you continue to hear today for women that want, in fact, to participate more fully in the life of the church in a formal kind of authoritative capacity. And so that to me was that kind of rang true, and it continues to ring true. And that's part of the reason, as I mentioned earlier, why I continue to do this work. So it will be something that you have to come up with some better reasons for this, And so especially for younger women for whom they haven't had that theological background and education, and that and they can easily then be more easily be dismissed. And that shouldn't be the way that we work in the academy or in sciences or in the church. You should always be able to encounter a question on its merits and answer it honestly. And I think that that is, and if something is true, it's going to come out to be true. If something, it should be able to stand up to any kind of scrutiny. And so instead of kind of falling back on kind of caricatures and or answers that don't really answer the question. I think I've gotten off track, but at any rate, I think that that's something that continues in all fields, and that it's something that sometimes we move forward and we make more progress, and sometimes we take a few steps back, and that's why you need to keep moving and pushing forward. I think I'll stop now. Thanks.
Okay, so I would say first, start challenges as a candidate, you know, because definitely when you are on these, you're gonna have to have the support of your family. And when you have children, because you are going to be extremely exhausted and you're hardly ever gonna see your children. And there has to be a lot of trust with your husband, your partner, you know, your significant other. Because I think I tried my best trying to get my husband involved in what was going on in the campaign on a daily basis. But then I think when we started, we were doing those check-ins in the evenings, but then I was up to a point where my feet were hurting because I was walking all day, or I was dialing for dollars and I was asking all of these people for money, or I was knocking on the doors or coming to events where I just didn't want to speak anymore. I'm like, I'm done speaking with anybody. I just want to go to my bed, you know, and then sleep and don't think about anything else. So we were able to talk about, you know, trying to find a different system of communication. So I felt like I had more energy in the mornings, and in the mornings I will give him like a schedule of the day of what I would do during the day. So he felt that he was part of that campaign. Now, my husband is Latino. So which in the interaction, there's a lot of machismo, you know, first, second, third generation, whichever generation there's a lot of machismo. So I think for him, being raised by a single mother, where he saw that she was the only, you know, breadwinner of the house, just expanded his mind that it was possible for a woman, I mean, not to like pay for every single bill in the house, because he still works, and as a delegate, I only make $17,000 a year, and I do have a different job, but it's just the fact that he won't see me. And he had to have that peace of mind of knowing that I was fighting for a right cause. So for me, it will give him a peace of mind, knowing where I was. It will give me a peace of mind that there was communication, and he trusts me enough that I was doing the right thing. Then as an elected official, I think there were, in the class of 2017, there were many mothers with little children who were elected. So we didn't, for example, out of 100 members, there were 19 women before 2018. And from that, we are now like 30 something, I can't remember exactly the name. But it's like, for example, we didn't have enough bathroom breaks. And I'm like, and the business was continuing, and you are like, okay, I need to go to the bathroom. You know, I can't just, and those conversations that never happened before. Or my colleague, Kathy Tran, where she had a baby, and she was bringing her baby with her to the floor because she needed to nurse him. You know, or, you know, I had another colleague, Jennifer Carol Foy, where she was pregnant while she was in the campaign and delivered the babies. They were preemies in the middle of that campaign. So she had two, and they were twins. So she could show up every now and then, where I don't think the mindset for males or for legislators in general, they never saw so many legislators playing the role of a mother, you know, and I would say also the communities and the tone of the conversation about immigrants and undocumented or Latinos in general. You know, in the past, I think that the first year they did a speech talking about with this rhetoric about demonizing community, that they are rapists, criminals, gang members. So I spoke and gave a passionate speech on year one. And after that, I have not heard it as of today. And I'm going into my fourth session this year. So definitely it helped me, you know, as far as represent my community, but it also helped them to understand that in this country, there were not only white people, you know, there were we were diverse and there were other cultures that were represented. And I think that we were doing a good job as far as giving a voice to voiceless communities that were not represented before. You know, I spoke about my colleague, Kathy Tran. She's from Vietnam, Vietnamese American. She came here as a child when she was 3 years old. Then we also had another Korean American, Mark Kim, that he came here as a child as well, like in the play that you're going to see. Then we have also recently elected the first Palestinian American, the first Indian American, the first transgender, you know. So we're having conversations that Virginia was a very, very conservative state. So talking about, you know, the LGBT community, it was just sometimes I could see the faces of my colleagues across the aisle turning red and didn't know what to do when they were having these conversations. So I think there are challenges, but we change them into opportunities about to give a voice to those voices communities that were not represented before.
Go ahead, Phyllis.
I was just thinking about how I wanted to answer this question. You know, much like everyone else has already said, there are struggles with being a person of the female persuasion, or rather someone that isn't male, in a community where the culture has been defined by those members. I'm extremely lucky in that I have many very intelligent and fully capable women that I work with presently, but you can feel that, you know, that culture is still in a transition phase, you know, where it's coming from this field, this sort of space science and engineering that was at one point in the past predominantly male, and now it's transitioning into something that's different. So there's still a lot of growing pains associated with that sometimes. And the number one that comes to mind, and Melissa talked about this a little bit earlier, is how do I, as a woman, look at having, you know, a full woman's life if I choose to have children? That's something that's a big question for me. And everyone in my field that I work with, they're all incredibly passionate, strong, driven people who believe in what they're working in. And, you know, there's often this like thought that when you're working on this subject and you're on this mission, this is everything. But it's not always, because we're all human beings. So how do you leave space for that? Not just necessarily to be a mother, but also a parent. And I think that's a challenge that I haven't come up against yet, but it's a big question mark for me in my life. So I'm a little anxious about what that's going to look like in the future for me. Like I said, I'm still pretty early career, but it's definitely a big question that I think many early career scientists overall are looking at how we're going to remain relevant and remain dedicated to what these missions are, but at the same time have a full human experience.
Well, I'll go now. And I did touch on it a little bit before, but what I'll say this time around is that some of the funding has been given to men over women, because on our proposals, you put your name, your affiliation, and all of that. And recently, NASA's been trying to do blind proposal reviews, and they had great success with the Hubble Space Telescope research. that a whole lot more women got funded when the process of reviewing proposals was blind. You didn't have a name on top of the proposal. And that to me is very telling about women in my career and in a male dominated field. There is kind of a, you know, the guys look out for the guys and feel like women maybe shouldn't be in this field. But it's changing. And now what I've heard recently from headquarters is they're going to start implementing double blind or blind reviews for a lot of other research programs. So I think that should help in a, you know, down the road too, for women getting more funding. And I think it's all going to be better in the future. We just need to get there incrementally. And would I like it to get there faster? I wish we'd already be at that parity, but we're not there yet, certainly in planetary science and in space sciences, but we're going to get there eventually. It just is taking a while.
Thank you, Melissa. And you kind of are bringing me right to our final wrap up point as we are running a little bit out of time. So thank you all for being here for this. And I'm going to ask what I hope is a simple question, what I think I would love to hear from you all is, you know, with challenges, in my view, come triumphs. And I think you all being here and being as knowledgeable and, you know, as warm and welcoming as you all have been by being part of this process with us means that you all have probably had a number of your own triumphs. So I'd love to hear just one from each of you. If we can, it can be as personal, as big or small as you'd want, but I'd love to do that.
Sure. Can I go first this time? Excellent. So for me, a really big triumph was, you know, I worked on this project, like I said, NASA's Parker Solar Probe, mission of firsts, really incredible. And having had a hand actually like turning screws and nuts and bolts on instruments for that project, seeing it bolted onto this tiny little spacecraft on top of this enormous rocket and, you know, watching it like, you know, ride a column of fire into the sky, never to be seen again. That's just incredible, you know, like the thing that represents so many people's just lives and hard work and dedication. When I moved into the office that I'm currently inhabiting at the Space Sciences Lab, there were, you know, a few mementos that have been left behind by other people. And one of them was this list of all of the children that had been born during the course of a particular project. And that touched me in a way that, and nothing else really has quite the same, because when you work on a big project like that, you really do form this community of people, of all kinds of people, of all different ages and that look different. And, you know, that becomes embedded in a lot of different people's lives. And so, you know, the fact that this incredible project has been so wildly successful so far, and, you know, these little instruments that maybe a group of 100 people knew about, now this whole wide scientific community, like, you know, you can go download the data if you like, it's free and open to the public, that anyone can access it from this place that people haven't ever been before, and it's free and open for everyone. That's a real gift that I'm happy to give the community.
Hey, I can go next. I would say I was able to have the opportunity to deliver the State of the Union rebuttal to Donald Trump in Spanish, and having Speaker Pelosi to give me a call to ask me to fulfill that role was historic, and that's something that I will be forever remember. And I think in 2019, I was selected as the 15 Latinas more influential in the country, you know, and by Univision. And I think that that's when you say, okay, I accomplished what I wanted. So I'm not saying I'm done, but at least I'm happy where I'm at now.
Well, since we're going in reverse order here, I have quite a somewhat mundane example, I think. And I think it was my first sermon when I was in seminary. The ability to realize, first of all, that I had things to say and that I could use my education to actually help to edify others. And that when I was finished, it didn't matter that I was the woman up there at the pulpit. It was just that what I had to say had moved people and had given them a new perspective on whatever it was, and it had touched their lives. So, and I hope for, I think, more of that in the future.
Okay, well, to wrap up, one of the things I've been proudest of was that I did get an interview to be an astronaut back in 2000. That was one of those things that's, always felt really good for me to have had that experience and to know I got this close. And one of the things I'll never forget is when John Young, who was one of the people who walked on the moon, was talking to my week interview group. He said to all of the people sitting in that room, I guess there were like maybe 11 of us that week for interviews. He said, what you have to remember is that all of you are capable of being astronauts. And this whole week isn't about selecting you to become an astronaut. It's knowing that you all could be, and that only a few of you will get the opportunity. But it wasn't that we had to prove that we were capable, because at that point we already were. He said it was just a matter of choosing people that, that way. So that'll carry with me forever. And maybe one day I'll get to space through commercial mode, because I would still really love to be weightless and have that space experience more than on just something like the Vomit Comet, which does parabolic flight to simulate weightlessness. I'd like to actually be in space, see the curvature of the Earth, and have those experiences you can't have, from the surface. So, that was one of the things that I really loved. And I've also had the opportunity to go to Antarctica and collect meteorites, and living in a tent for 6 weeks on the ice was pretty incredible too. So, I managed to find a career that gives me some real mind-bending opportunities, extreme opportunities to get to a lot of cool places and have a lot of wonderful experiences, including launches of spacecraft. That's all been really, really wonderful too. So, and then during the quarantine, my biggest challenge was growing a garden. So that was my little Yahoo. I've grown things that we can actually eat. So that's been pretty incredible too. So I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Melissa. I too have become a plant mom in this time, so I understand the victory that is. Well, thank you. It has really brought me so much joy to be able to hear from you all and get to know a little bit more about you and the work that you've been doing. So thank you for joining us in this process. And thank you for your time. And to our audience out there, thank you for listening in. Please check out Derecho. It's going to be on tonight at 5 p.m. Pacific time, and all of the rest of our shows that'll be running next weekend as well. And thank you again to our panelists for being here.